Hey there, it's Professor Who. Going to talk to you today more about fractions, another part of our whole series on fractions. Guess what? That's a fraction, part of a whole. So this part, we're actually going to be talking about adding and subtracting fractions with like denominators. So I think it's important that first you understand what is a like denominator. We know what a denominator is, and we know what a numerator is, we know what the division line is, so we know all the parts of a fraction. The denominator is found at the bottom of a fraction, and it indicates how much of something makes up the whole. So in this case, you'll notice that our denominators both have 8 pieces that make up the whole thing. So imagine that it was, let's say, a pizza, because pizzas are usually cut into 8 pieces. In this fraction, you have 3 of the 8 pieces, and in this fraction, you have 4 of the 8 pieces. 8 pieces only indicates how much makes up a whole pizza. So back to like denominators. Sometimes it's called like denominators, or you'll hear it as common denominators. So if you really think about what the words mean, like and common, then you'll get an idea of what they're talking about for these denominators. Common, if you have something in common, it means that you and somebody else have something similar, or that's the same. In this case, you'll notice that the denominators have in common that they are both 8. They both require the same amount of pieces to make up the whole thing, making it a common denominator. If you hear the word like, I think of it as, and that's why I put a little bow here. We have a little lady, we have a little man with a nice little hat here. They like each other because they are the same. They're compatible. They can hook up, go on a date, and they both have 8. So we have 8 as our denominator. It's common, it's like, versus unlike denominators, un meaning not alike. So imagine if one of these was not 8, let's say the young lady stayed 8, but the pizza on the left, our young man, turns into a 5. Our denominators are now different. That's what we call unlike denominators. So this is very important when you're adding and subtracting fractions, because sometimes you'll have unlike denominators, sometimes you'll have like denominators. We are only going to talk about like denominators at this time. So the first thing that you should do if you see an addition or subtraction symbol between your fractions is look at your denominators. Are they common, or are they like? If they are, it's going to make your life very simple, because the 8 only indicates that they are both cut up to the same amount of pieces to make up the whole. So all you really have to do is add the numerators and keep the denominator the same. So in this case, our denominator is going to be the same. So I'm going to show an equal sign here. I will need a fraction line, so let me get back here. What a lovely fraction line. I'm really bad at drawing with this mouse, my apologies. The denominator stays the same because both pizzas require 8, and we'll talk more about why the denominator stays 8 later on. Just focus right now on the process. If the denominators are the same, just carry the denominator over so it stays the same as well, and then you just add the pieces that you actually have or that you're working with. So here's 3 here plus 4 there gives us a total of 7. So if you think of it in terms of pizza or food, 8 total pieces in the pizza. Last night you ate 3, and then in the morning you had 4 pieces for breakfast. You add those together to find out how many total that you've eaten, and it's 7. 3 plus 4 is 7. When you're young, you just pay attention to the numerators. Oh, I had 3 pieces of pizza, then I ate 4 pieces. How many pieces did I eat total? 7. Now that you're getting older, you're starting to realize, well, that was 7 out of 8 total, and that's where your fractions come in. To illustrate this even further, let's take a look at a Lego. This Lego piece here is made up of 8 total pegs. You can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or you can look at it as an array. 4 by 2 is 8. So imagine, I'm going to take one of these yellow 1 by 1 bricks. I'm going to set it on top to show that I'm focused on 1 out of the 8. I've covered 1 of the 8. Therefore, this fraction is 1 out of 8. But imagine that I took another 1 out of 8. So 1/8 plus 1/8. Being young, you might look at it as I have 2 pegs. I have 1 plus 1. That's easy. I can see that. But as a fraction, you also include how many make up the whole brick, the 8. I have 1 out of 8 here and 1 out of 8 here. 1 plus 1 is 2, and my denominator is still 8. If I had, let's say I had 4 all the way across, so I have 4 out of 8, but this time I want to subtract. I want to take one away. So I have 4 eighths, and I want to minus one of these 8. So I want to subtract an eighth. 4 out of 8, subtract 1 out of 8, and we'll use our delete tool here, gives us 3 out of 8. 4 minus 1 is 3, all back over the original denominator. So really, the big thing that take away here is understanding, one, that fractions, when you're adding and subtracting, you want to have like denominators. You want them to be common. In this case, we had eighths. That way, you can just focus on adding the pieces that you have and putting it back over the original denominator. This goes for both addition and subtraction. However, when we get to multiplication and dividing, there are going to be some different rules. Just like with decimals, adding and subtracting decimals have a specific rule, and multiplying and dividing decimals have their own rules. Same thing with fractions, because fractions are parts of a whole, same with decimals. The rule for adding and subtracting fractions have like denominators. Just add the numerators and the denominator stays the same. But multiplying and dividing, when we get there, it's going to be a whole different ball game there, so get ready for that. So there you go. That's how you add and subtract fractions with like or common denominators.